Good evening, and welcome to Conversation at the Royal. My name is Ahmed. I'm a forensic psychiatrist. I'm not a researcher in terrorism. But like you all here tonight, I'm affected by it day by day. With the wave of the acts that go on all over the world, it has become very topical. When things of this nature happen and threaten our survival, we wonder and ask ourselves questions. Are these individuals mad? Do they have mental illness? Are they just bad? The debate on whether or not the mental health of individuals who are involved in terrorist acts is an ongoing debate because we do not have any clear evidence as to whether or not these individuals are mentally ill. The bulk of the literature suggests that they do not have major mental disorder. They may have certain personality traits that predispose them to being terrorists. But as to whether or not these individuals have mental disorder is a different question. There's no doubt that among these individuals as well, we do have specific cases where mental illness may play a role. A review of the literature also indicates to us that the mental health of a terrorist himself, after he has left the organization or while still in the organization, is something that we need to listen to. There's no doubt about it that most researchers in this area have suggested that education and early education helps to prevent against this very important issue. Tonight, the Royal is going to be contributing to that aspect of it by educating our own community on what the terrorist act and what goes on the mind of a terrorist. Since I'm not an expert in this very complicated area, I've decided to seek the help of two very important individuals who have done research, either as a social critic or they've done research in looking into the mind of terrorists. We have Dr. Wadgy Loza, who has done extensive research in this area. Dr. Wadgy Loza is an adjunct assistant professor in psychiatry at the Queen's University. He was an ex-adjunct professor of psychology at Carleton University. He's a licensed psychologist. He's the ex-chair of the Extremism and Terrorism section of Canadian Psychological Association. In 2009, when he retired from Correctional Service of Canada after almost 30 years of working and gathering experiences, assessing and treating these individuals, Dr. Wadgy Loza decided to continue to pursue his interest, which he just told us started over 30 years ago. He was the chief psychologist of Queen's Penitentiary, is currently a member of the Ontario Review Board. And having rubbed shoulder with him on this board, I find his contribution very enlightening. I'm always learning from him. His research interests include areas predicting violence and non-violence recidivism among the prison and correctional population, including forensic. His understanding of extremism and terrorism became a primary preoccupation for him as he continued to do this. He got me involved in a study where we're looking at the kind of ideology that predispose individuals who have a terrorist act. I'm a Nigerian originally, and it shocks me that a country like Nigeria, where when I was growing up, there was no question of terrorism, what was happening. So while we were sharing this discussion, I said, AG, why don't we do a study? We did a study. I will leave the finding of those to another day. To support Dr. Wadgy Loza is another eminent scholar here. Professor Adesanmi is one of Nigeria's contemporary leading public intellectuals, and a celebrated columnist. He's a professor of English. He's not a communist, so don't. He's a professor of English and African Studies at Carleton, a widely cited commentator on African affairs. He has lectured widely in universities in Africa, Europe, and North America. Among his numerous lectures and keynote credits, Adesanmi has notably addressed audiences on African issues on such prestigious platforms such as the Stanford Forum for African Studies, the International Leadership Platform for University of Johannesburg, the African Unity for Renaissance Diaspora Constitution, and so on and so forth. Adesanmi completed a one-year stint recently in Ghana, where he was a visiting professor. And in addition to that, he is the internationally acclaimed winner of the inaugural Penguin Prize for African Writing in 2010. These individuals will be giving you their views, then we will engage in real conversation when I will tell you what I thought about mental illness. Happy to welcome Dr. Wadgy Loza. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed and Ms. Loreto, for inviting me to this, and thank you very much for attending. I am allowed 15 minutes, so I'll be going very fast, but then I welcome any question you may have after the presentation. Basically, the end goal for all the terrorists is to establish the Muslim state, the caliphate system, whereby all live in a pure Islamic country and then dominate the whole world and governed by one person who is Imam or Khalifa. That's what in their mind, and that's why ISIS or ISIL or Islamic Society, they're the same as Islamic State, they are the same, and that's what they are preaching, and that's what they are hoping for, and actually they are having some success in the Middle East. So I'm going to confine my presentation to the psychological characteristics. That's what I'm required to do. And I will talk about the belief, the thinking, feelings, attitudes, and behavior, and I'll try very quickly to summarize my findings or the findings of the others who research this area. The first one is in the ideologies, and the main driving force for terrorism is ideology. The real estate people always say location, location, location. When it comes to terrorism, it is ideology, 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 nothing else. Now, what that means? There must be revival of religion via jihad. Jihad is a holy war, and jihad is called fard ain. What's fard ain means? That every able Muslim must do this holy war. That's according to the extremists. When I said Muslim all the time, I'm talking only about extremists. There is billions of Muslims, peaceful, loving people, exactly like you. They want to raise their kids, they want to go to work, earn their dollar, and live happy. So when I talk in my 15 minutes talk, I'm talking only about the extremists, nothing more. So they believe that they must have a holy war. It is a duty to fight the kafirin. The kafirin, it's a bad word. If you say it in Arabic to somebody, we tell them you are a kafir. This is very bad word to say kafir. Kafir means infidel. Again, the state of war between two sides, which is house of the peace and house of the war, they divide the world too, Muslim countries and other countries. Muslim countries, this is the house of the peace. Other countries are not the house of the peace. We must fight them. Democracy is not compatible with religion. No, they must apply Sharia law. Democracy is a Western invention. They should not go by it. Citizenship should be via religion. And that's what happened in Egypt. I'm originally from Egypt, and when the Muslim Brotherhood took control of Egypt, one of them will say, which is very high in the rank, I don't care about Egypt, I care about Islam. My brother Muslim from Indonesia, I will give him more respect than my brother who lived next door to me. So the loyalty is not to the country. If you are a Canadian, you wouldn't really care much about Canada. You care about your brother in religion. They don't like the man-made rules. They want only the God's made rules, which is Sharia as written in the Quran. A just world will only be achieved if everybody become a Muslim. Otherwise, it will not be a just world. The West is sort of evil. They hate the West, and they always bring the issue of crusaders. Some of you, the majority of you will know about what crusaders are. These are the people when the Muslim invaded Jerusalem and part of Europe and expanded to Spain and almost to Vienna and France, the Pope kind of appealed to people and said, listen, they are invading our lands, taking our women and children, selling them in the market. What do we do? The crusader came in and they had a fight. They don't perceive it this way. They perceive it from the time that the crusader came in. They perceive them as the aggressors. And that's why they always, Bin Laden keeps saying the crusaders, the crusaders, the crusaders. And it sank in people who brains that crusaders did wrong. If you don't know the history, then that's what happened. And we will talk about brainwashing at some point in this presentation. Dying as a martyr is the most honorable thing. That's what happened in Gaza. That's what happened in Iran and Hezbollah and all of these extreme political identities. They love martyrdom. It gives them a status, and they believe that it is commanded by God to die as a martyr. So enough of the ideology. There is so more into ideology, but I just selected some of them. Thinking is brainwashed because these ideologies that I talked about, they hear it over and over and over. When you keep hearing this, when you are young and all of that, it gets ingrained in your mind, and some will start believing more than others in it. Their thinking is black and white. There is no gray. You're either with us or against us. Complex issues, they see it only in terms of yes or no. You cannot be, it can be more than that or have many factors. Other views are bad. It is only our views. Our views are the views that God commanded us to do, and we are following God. Therefore, you are wrong. You must be wrong. They are not objective. They want to see things as they want to see it. If you go with extremists. Extremists in any discipline anyway would like to convince you of their views. They will die but not lose an argument. And their biggest pleasure when they convert somebody to their side. Their thinking is utopian, which means they look for the perfect world. They cannot see that the world does not function in utopia. Utopia is something that is not attainable. They cannot comprehend that. Now, the feelings. They have some problems, and again, these are the people who go into extreme thinking, they become extremists or terrorists. They have some problems in their own life, and that's why you see people, even the 2 Canadians that we heard about a couple of months ago, there is some problems somewhere. So, inability to hold a job, his girlfriend told him to get lost, whatever the case may be, they get so annoyed and it affects them. Dissatisfaction with some sort of political ideas or social or economical or politics, whatever the case may be. They combine this and this. They get so much aggravated. They always see themselves as humiliated. They are victim of injustice. If you hear Bin Laden, if you hear any of the advertisement that is being said by ISIS or the rest, they never say anything but we are defending our land. We're defending the wrong that has been done to us. The West have done so much to us. And this goes to the political reason for extremism and terrorism, which means the West has occupied us for long. We have been defeated in 1967, if you know some history, when Israel defeated 3 or 4 countries. The West is, when they occupy us, they took all our resources, and it goes on and on and on in terms of justifying how they are victims. They have no business to be in Iraq, the states. There is no business to be in Afghanistan. Some of what they are saying may be true. You may agree, for example, that states had no business to be in Iraq. I am one of the people who agree with that, but that does not necessarily mean that you go and pick up arms and you try to revenge and to correct the wrong with your own weapon. And strong feeling for revenge, a desire to correct the wrong. And that's what the extremists in the recruitment process, that's what they look for. That's what they want to do, to increase the anger so much to the extent that you really wanted to go and kill somebody. So they said, come with us and we will give you the avenue, we'll give you the training, and we'll tell you how to do it. The attitude, again, is our religion is superior than any other religion. Our culture is much better than yours. In fact, one of the imam made the big mistake in Australia by talking about the women as white meat. And he went on a mosque and said that, and it caused huge uproar. But the poor guy did not know that he was in Australia. He's not talking to his own people. And that's how the attitude of negative to others. For example, a kid will say to his friends in school, oh, you eat pigs. We don't eat pigs. We are better than you. Then the kid go to his parent and ask, do we really eat pigs? We must be bad. So this is the attitude that is in their brains, and they want others to believe that they are better in terms of culture and better of religion and all of that. I think I touched on this. They blame others because it's easier that I blame you than I blame myself or you blame me. So it's better that I blame somebody else. Again, They place themselves as victims, freedom fighters, revolutionaries, whatever. They dehumanize their victim. They call them, actually, the brothers of the pigs. That's what they call them. Ikhwat al-Khanazir, which is brothers of the pigs. They said they are wicked, they conspire all the time, and that's their victim. Therefore, they deserve to be killed. And that makes it easy for them to be extreme with them and to do whatever they want. It is very important for them, whoever follow them, that they have conformity, whereby they develop solidarity among themselves. They develop group mind, whereby them versus us. And again, this makes it easy to attack the others because they are on the other side. They are not like us. One of the things, once somebody follow or join one of this extremist group, they demand absolute loyalty to the Amir. Amir is the leader of the group, who will lead them, will instruct them, who will tell them what to do. Now we get into the are terrorists mentally ill? Some said they psychopath, schizophrenia, depression. Actually, I was so surprised, and I can't get over this, that I read right in Canada and here, somebody was treating, have a program in Toronto, and this imam said, we believe that terrorists are, or people who get involved in terrorism, they are depressed. Therefore, we have a psychiatrist who treat them with antidepressants. Which, in my judgment, this to be presented to the Senate made me so mad. I was so angry. I want to commit terrorism against this guy. Okay. I don't have to. Okay, I'm going to quote some from the literature exactly as it is. This guy is a researcher from, very well researcher from Israel, who interviewed the families of the completed people who completed bomb attacks against others, or the guy who were not successful in going and blowing himself up, and he find that there is no psychopathology whatsoever in them. Another researcher, and I believe he's a psychiatrist, Dr. Post, said that there is the common characteristic that they are normal. Another thing is that the severely psychotic person is not able to implement different tasks, complicated tasks. A guy who is delusional and all of that may think about doing something and all of that, but when it comes to buying weapon, following instruction, being on this date, getting training and all of that, it's very hard to do. In fact, terrorist groups, they, like anybody else, like any group, must trust the people they are dealing with, because they may be scared that they're going to squeal on them, or they talk about them to police, and this is the worst thing that they wanted to see happening. Therefore, they don't really accept them. Seriously disturbed people do that on their own, normally. They may not necessarily be psychotic or severely psychotic, but again, like Dr. Ahmed said, have some personality problem. And that's where they go there. And that's the incident in here in Arwa is one of this example. Why I'm convinced 99.5% that terrorists are devout. They are devout, and devout to what? To the ideologies that we talked about. The USA 9/11, they were all very sane. One of them, Ata, he is, I think, master in engineering in Germany. He was able to drive a very nice aeroplane. He commanded it. The people with him, they were all well educated, always from good families. By the way, this alienation theory and they are poor and uneducated, just throw all of this in the garbage because it is not true. It is ideology. The bombing in England, in Spain, in Berry, the Scottish doctors who went in the airport tried to attack it. What happened with the Toronto 18? The 12 or something doctors that they tried to or joined already ISIS lately, last week or something like this. It's all over in the news. All of them are very respectable. They have good IQ. They have good education. They good family. They are not poor or anything. Bin Laden is a very rich man, very wealthy man. El-Zawahiri, this guy was a doctor. His father used to teach in Faculty of Medicine in Egypt. Very well-to-do family. He himself is a doctor. Jihadi John, the guy who wielding his knife and beheading people. Dr. Nidal, he's a psychiatrist, the guy from Texas. Abu Bakr, if you have seen him, the guy who, the chair of ISIS, he speaks very quietly. You would love him if you don't know that he is the guy who is commanding ISIS, because he talks in a very nice, quiet voice, respectable. He go to the pulpit and speak in a nice voice. Sadat's killer, if you know about the people who killed Sadat in Egypt, they were army officers. Some of them were engineers. They were well educated and saner than anybody else. Boko Haram, and my colleague in here will talk about them. Muslim Brotherhoods, after they lost governing Egypt, they went crazy. Not mentally ill, they went crazy in the other way, which means they burned 80-some churches. They burned government offices. They killed, and they are still killing right now in a daily basis in Egypt, in Sinai there. They kill tourists. All of this need planning. All of this need to be 100% up here to organize and to pay people to do these things. So we said no. Now, are they bad? It depends which side you are on. If you are, for example, with Hamas, the one on the border with Israel, you do these things, you walk on the street like hero. People will be delighted to invite you. They are called the living martyrs. He will be walking and everybody would like just to touch him or to touch her. It is more men than... So, for us in here, they are bad. And if you see people, if you have seen the guy who was burned alive, the Jordanian guy, he was put in a cage and burned. If you see ISIS taking 21 Copts from Egypt and then slaughtering them, and then all this behavior, you would know that I think this is bad enough to be called bad action. However, they also have history of collaborating with drug dealers. They used to, in the early 70s and 80s, when they were not strong, they will go and attack shops in Egypt to get money to support their habit. ISIS is doing exactly the same. They are taking ransom from people, they are taking, vandalizing their homes and all of this. They are kidnapping for money, and in Egypt, some of these elements are doing exactly the same, something that was not there before this 2011 revolution. It was not there. Now this is talking about the personalities, what they look for, what they want, the recruiters. The recruiting for ISIS is slightly different than recruiting for Hamas. Slightly different, the same principle, but it is a bit different, or recruiting from the West in here. When they deal with the West, it's different mentality. So what they look for somebody who is lonely, looking for fulfillment, self-actualization, fulfillment, status, power, want to be somebody, want to carry a gun and feel that he's cool or something, want camaraderie. And that's the type of person, particularly in a special age, between 15 to 25 or something like that, whereby they lack direction, they want something for adventure, they think it's cool to do these things, and that's what they target. I have been asked several times about the media. In the early 70s in Egypt and in the Arab world, they use CDs, and it goes all over the place. Again, talking about ideologies and how Islam is being humiliated, and we should do this and we should do that to revenge. Now, with the high tech that we have, they have the internet. I was surprised to hear this, that there is around 90,000 tweets a day from or about ISIS. Al-Qaeda said a long time ago, we should use the internet. During the internet, again, they talk about how they are grieved, how the West took advantage of them, how they have no business in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and they keep saying and saying and saying. And if a kid who does not have a good grasp of history, it's very easy to believe what's being said. Now, if you watch one of their videos, you will see a guy who is speaking in kind of Saudi Arabia's language. He is very soft in his voice, with nice music, with these black flags waving like you saw in there, very quiet, talking about their old time and how is Islam, and how is Islam was victorious in the past, and how is Islam now being defeated. We are the joking lot of the world because the West is doing this to us. We must revenge. And that's basically what they tell them in this video. They tell them, if you come with us, you will have fun. You will join people. Look, it's in here. Look at the desert. Look at this is Syria, this is Iraq. You will have everything you want, and you will have freedom. You don't have to have a teacher. You don't have to go to school. You don't have to listen to your parents and all that. Just come with us. To the girls, they tell them you're going to marry and all of this on our account, and you don't have to pay anything. We have to pay for everything. The problem is when they go there and they figure out that it is not as rosy or as good as they were promised, they want to get out of it, they get killed. And my understanding that there are around 2,800 persons have been killed because they wanted to leave. And with this, I thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Nicole, and thanks, Dr. Ahmed, for having me, and thank you all for... Okay, maybe I'm going to do like this and just... I'm tall and I tend to talk with my hands and my body, so... okay, so how are we going to do this? We were told that we have 15 minutes each, but I sense that Dr. Loza played a fast one on Dr. Ahmed. You didn't specify if it was 15 Canadian minutes or African minutes. So Dr. Loza understood African minutes, and I'm going to support him. Okay, yeah, the mere fact that somebody like me, I'm standing here today to talk about terrorism. I teach literature, I teach cultural studies, and when I'm not doing that, then I'm busy jumping up and down across North America, Europe, and the continent, talking about political issues. As they call me a public intellectual. But I never knew that I would one day have to add this hat as a specialist, so to speak, an emergency specialist of terrorism. But that's where we are. If you're a Nigerian, whether you like it or not, you know, you have come to be defined by these enormous problem of terrorism called Boko Haram, you know, I'm sure. So it defines us. And to the extent that it's become inescapable wherever you go, you know, no matter what your subject is, no matter what you're talking about, people want to know, hey, what's going on with Boko Haram in Ukraine, especially after the whole world sort of had to join up with the celebrity culture that grew up around the Bring Back Our Girls. But just to tell you how rapidly, you know, Bring Back Our Girls, that feels like ages ago now, because this is the latest headline, you know, the latest headline is from yesterday. So every day it's become so banal that one has lost count, and to that extent, because it's become so inexplicable and banal, the straight answer that somebody like me would give to the topic that we have today, are they mad, are they bad? Of course, you know, as a layman, a layperson, you say, yeah, these guys are crazy. Why should there even be any debate about that, whether the guys in Boko Haram are mad or whether they are bad? Of course they are mad and bad, you know. That's the knee-jerk, the impulsive, instinctive reaction that would come out of a layperson who who isn't inclined to take the time to get into the deeper issues and understand nuances and the complexities of the situation and the background and what we're dealing with. And superimposed on that is the fact that there is a layman's public discourse around madness, around these guys are crazy. That's what the average Nigerian would tell you. They're crazy, they're mad, and largely because you find it difficult to ascribe any sense of logic, any sense of understanding, not only to the scale of what they do, but sometimes to how it comes about, especially in its international dimensions. You know, 3 or 4 years ago, there was this kid, Abdul Muttalab, who tried to blow up a plane, you know, going to Detroit, I believe. Now, this kid, just when you thought that you'd come to an understanding of Boko Haram, you know, the sensational Western understanding of that name means, you know, Western education. Western civilization is abominable, is forbidden, is prohibited. That's the literal meaning, but there are other meanings, other deeper meanings to that, but that's the easily accessible, globalized meaning of what they're out to do. If that's what that domestic terrorism is about, then you start wondering, how do you understand Abdul Muttalib? Here is a guy whose trajectory, you know, from growing up in Nigeria, he's a child of wealth, considerable wealth and privilege, went through the British upper class institutions in Nigeria and neighboring Togo and all that, had gone to London, you know, for very private, exclusive education, you know, considerable wealth. And then somehow this guy gets radicalized and ends up in Yemen, and then back in Yemen, he hops on a train to America, he's going to destroy America. How does that happen? It doesn't make sense. He's got to be mad, he's got to be crazy and all that. And then only recently, 3 weeks ago, the son of a former Chief Justice of Nigeria, out of the blue, these are guys, again, moneyed class, you know, British, everything. These are guys speaking Cockney. These are guys speaking Cockney. Out of the blue, this guy takes off from Nigeria and goes to Syria. He's going to join ISIS. And people started saying, well, the self-deprecating humor is to the Nigerian what the maple syrup is to the Canadian. And so people started saying, oh, you know, the saddest thing about this thing is that we've got Boko Haram. These Nigerians, they don't like things Nigerian. They don't like our local products. He had to go all the way to Syria to join a terrorist organization. Why not just join Boko Haram at home? And because he didn't think local, but went global to ISIS, so the national consensus is that this guy, he's got to be mad. He's got to be crazy to do that. And then you move on to the leader of them all, our friend Abubakar Shekau, the leader of Boko Haram. That's Nigeria's answer to Osama bin Laden. Yeah, there is a pervading discourse of madness. There are some say it's all the psychos that some say he's a psychopath, some say he's psycho this, psycho that, and I guess that has been enabled by, not just by the incomprehensibility of how their actions and their acts have evolved over the years. We're talking now about 30 to 40,000 victims, depending on your source, but 30 to 40,000, because now they move through villages, they raise them, they kidnap, they kill and all that. Just kidnapped another 400 yesterday, sometimes 2,000. So they just, it's thousands, and people can't understand that. But what has added to that is, and then of course there are the videos. Shekar's got a lot of videos where the way people studying, you know, his mannerism, the way he speaks, he sounds completely deranged. So it's like, is he barking? Is he a mad person? I've got a video of him here. Is this guy suffering from necrophilia? All you encounter all these things, and there's a reason for that. But above all that is that he's been able to also create a sense of national schizophrenia by being somewhat, not just indestructible, but almost omnipresent in the national psyche, in the national atmosphere, everywhere you are. And because, you know, I don't know how many times Shekau has been killed. And I don't know how many people have killed him. But at least, you know, every time you wake up to news by the Nigerian government, the Nigerian military, oh, we killed Shekau yesterday. Sometimes bodies have been, oh yeah, that's Shekau, that's his body and all that, you know. We're finally done, we read. And then 3 days later, another video mocking and taunting them. Then some other organization, some other, you know, oh, we killed him. And then because he has sort of internationalized, it's become a regional problem. They're causing a lot of problem in Cameroon, in Chad, all the surrounding countries to the north of Nigeria, you know, kidnapping, killing, and all that, ransacking. And so those countries sometimes also announce, you know, Chad recently announced that they had captured and killed him. 2 days later, he's back. So everywhere this guy has acquired some kind of legend, some kind of mythological status in terms of one's inability to even grasp him. I want to really focus on now is beyond the question about madness and badness and the reality of what we've got in terms of the figures. You know, we're talking 30,000. What is really this Boko Haram? And why, Dr. Loza was asking me, why have we not been able to curb it in Nigeria, contain it, you know, to a reasonable extent, or even, you know, eradicate it in Nigeria? And one would have to understand, I keep trying to, yeah, okay. One would have to try to understand Nigeria in terms of its history, in terms of its political history, its economic history, its social history, how it came about. And I think I have a map. Okay, where's John now? Ah, voila. Okay. So from a layman's perspective, depending on who you're looking at, again, these statistics are never always, how did 170 million to 200 million people, depending on which figures you're looking at, come to inhabit this space? So we're talking of the most populous black nation state on the face of the earth. You know, 1 out of every 5 black people walking the face of the earth is a Nigerian. It's an extremely wealthy country. It's the 6th largest producer of crude oil, and its crude oil is of the superior. So it's a very, very important country. There's a lot of petrol. It's sinking in petrodollars. Roughly, you've got about 300 distinct ethnic nationalities, almost 500 languages, you know, almost 500 languages, 500, 700, depending on if you want to factor in, dialectal variants of those languages. So how did these people, and of course superimposed on all these differences and realities, you have the fact that it's also roughly equally divided among the 2 major religions. You know, it's such that it's a very funny, if you look at this map and you cut it into half, physically, if you're in Nigeria, if you travel to Nigeria physically, anything that's below half of that map, if you're in Lagos, you're in Port Harcourt, any of those cities, culturally, outlook, you could be in Ottawa, you could be in Toronto, you could be in Manhattan, you could be anywhere. Climb up the upper half, and it's another world. It's another civilization. You are in the Arabo-Islamic world. It's the contrast is that sharp. It's really that sharp. Sometimes things happen up north. Things happen up north. If you're down south, you need CNN and BBC to be aware of what's going on up north. That's how. So these divisions and fault lines are what the British cobbled together in 1914. Coupled it together in 1914 and kept it somehow with an iron hand and with all kinds of policies, divide and rule, that we cannot go into here, and sort of just left it smoldering in 1960. They left it with nobody happy, nobody satisfied. So no sooner had the British left than things started to fall apart. All kinds of discontents, all kinds of agitations, all kinds of contestations of the very basis of statehood. Are we one? Who are we? Who is a Nigerian? You know, so people started moving back into their ethnic enclaves, into their cultural enclaves, so people started questioning the very basis of nationhood. And out of these divisions, we had a civil war. And so Boko Haram is to be seen as a continuation of very serious problems of discontent with the nation-status arrangement that the British had left, and the way they actually went about imposing that. Of course, other things crept in. What exacerbated it would be the fact that all the oil comes from the deep south. The oil that feeds this, and it's a lot of oil. It's a lot of oil. Nigeria says she's a federal state, but she's only federal in name, because genuine federalism means that there is regional autonomy included. But in Nigeria, if you are at the center, if you are Ottawa in Nigeria, you control everything. It's the exact opposite of what happens, you know, the provinces here. So, you know, Alberta keeps her oil, British Columbia keeps her what do we have in British Columbia? Yeah, they keep their fish, their salmon. And yeah, I did my PhD at UBC, so I should know about salmon and all that. If you were in Nigeria, no, you would have no control over your salmon. If you were British Columbia, everything would have to go to the center. The center is that powerful. So whoever controls that center owns everything, and you can't question that. So the fight for that center is what has led to a civil war and has led to agitations down south and produced a sort of rebel movement down south that Nigeria was dealing with since 1999, because the people wanted a fairer deal in terms of their access to the proceeds of their oil, because they were producing it, and the Nigerian federal government, in collaboration with the Western oil interests, had spent decades committing eco-genocide and impoverishing the owners of the oil. But how did the federal government handle their agitation? At first, they wanted to use force, but they went to the negotiating table and, you know, just started to treat them really nice. But when these northerners came, when they came with their own agitation, so I'm saying that Boko Haram had an economic underbelly. Cultural, it's not just religious. It's about all the problems of access and the nature, the political nature of the Nigerian state. So, you know, religion is just the veneer on it. So when this started as a local, well, if we're not going to have, first the testing was, okay, we want Sharia. We want Sharia law. And the states in the north got Sharia law. And then, well, the discontents continued and Boko Haram started. President Yar'Adua, at some point, they all started negotiating, but at some point, the tone of the federal government changed, and the leader back in 2008 was arrested. And before global cameras, you know, it's on YouTube. I don't want to pull it up. You know, they just released him in the streets of Maiduguri and executed him. They executed him in full public glare. You know, the video is on. He's walking, and soldiers just shot him, executed him. Extrajudicial killing of Yusuf, the original leader of Boko Haram. So they sensed that the militants in the Niger Delta, when they had their own agitation, you went to the negotiating table with them, offered them billions of dollars, and sort of just babysat them. And now we have our own, and this is what we get. You kill our leader extrajudicially. This is what has brought us to the full-blown, you know, religious side of it. But a third aspect to this thing, and this is where I'm going to come back to my Canadian minutes now. The third aspect to this thing, though, is that if you look at this map, where you have red is where you really have the Boko Haram activity. That's where they are operating. But if you were looking at this situation from the outside, you'd think it was the whole of Nigeria, you know. So the manner in which Boko Haram is reported or not reported also contributes to local feelings back home of who is mad. Is it Boko Haram? Is it the rest of the country? You know, are we just all paranoid or schizophrenic? Or is it the international community that has two extreme ways of processing Boko Haram? Either they are completely ignorant about where it is really working and they think that every Nigerian is Boko Haram or everything about Nigeria is Boko Haram, largely due to bring back our girls. Or sometimes Boko Haram is considered inferior in a way to other forms of global terrorism in terms of how it is processed in the Western world, and that creates certain effects in Nigeria in terms of how we also see it and perspectivize it. Take two instances. The very day that ISIS murdered 12 journalists in Paris, the Charlie Hebdo massacres in Paris, Boko Haram killed 2,000 Nigerians that day. Killed 2,000 Nigerians that day. Je suis Charlie exploded. And folks were trying to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? 2,000 people were also killed the same day. So he's going to say, je suis Baga and all that. But that couldn't happen. And so the politics of the two global events, you know, shows you a lot about who is processing Boko Haram and how and why they're processing it. Because what subsequently happened is, of course, you had the march. You had that march in Paris, you know, in solidarity with France. And for a while on Twitter, the fact that the president of Nigeria sent a condolence message to the president and people of France for 12 French people who were killed, but wouldn't even acknowledge the 2,000 Nigerians who were murdered the same day by terrorists in his own country, because it wouldn't look good. He was preparing for election. You know how, if you acknowledge that, then you are not strong on terrorism. So they wouldn't even acknowledge that. So all the focus at home was in France. And then you had the image of the president of the neighboring Benin Republic, the Republic of Benin, who went to he was the only president photographed, you know, weeping profusely in France. And that picture went viral, you know, he's weeping profusely, and look at this guy, he's weeping in France over 12 journalists, but has not reacted to the massacre of 2,000 of his brothers back in Nigeria. So a lot of that entered. And then entered the American general, Spider-Max. He's always on CNN. He's always on CNN. He's a retired general and a pundit now on CNN. And he was the one who then turned that thing actually into a racial issue, and that trended a while on, because he was asked. I'll just play that clip and then we'll get back with the discussion. I'll conclude. When he was asked why the 2000 massacre in Baga couldn't attract global attention and all that, and he actually started giving a good answer in terms of the priorities of the United States and the Western world, until he suddenly turned it into, if it's affecting black people, it's different from, maybe if Boko Haram moves up north, if it gets white and they get to white Africa, maybe it will, why has it been so difficult to contain Boko Haram? Well, there's one answer right there in the thinking of this guy. You know, you can't build any credible international coalition around it if there are guys like this thinking, oh, it's a problem in black Africa, until it starts to really affect the white world. Well, it's there. So that thinking is there. Domestically, is the absence of a national will to fight this thing, which is absolutely understandable, because the meaning of nationhood is still being fiercely contested in Nigeria, so that there are many reflections, domestic reflections of the Spider-Max approach to this problem. If the militants, the Niger Delta militants, are bombing themselves in the deep south, the man up north, who is culturally different, religiously different, has had no national sentiment, no national affiliation to that country. It's just a contraption that the British forced on everybody, an inconvenient arrangement. There's still that sense in there. How is that my problem? If they're killing themselves up north, in fact, the last time I went to Nigeria, back in October, Boko Haram had just murdered about 50 people, which is low in terms of their record. In these days of social media, you know, the tendency when you get off the plane, is after transatlantic flights, is you want to reconnect, you know, and all that. So, you know, I was in the immigration line in Lagos, and I took out my phone, Twitter, Facebook, what's happening, and everybody all my friends in Europe, in Canada, everybody, oh my God, you know, 50 people killed and all that. And then I get to town in Lagos. It was as if it never happened. So I needed to connect to Canada to get a sense of the tragedy that had happened that day up north in Nigeria. Why? It's those guys. It's those Hausa Muslim guys. We are Christians, Yoruba and Igbo and Ijaw down south. Yeah, you know, so it's very difficult to build a national will that would override deep-seated divisions and fault lines. So unless somebody's political career, for instance, is at stake, because in the last 6 weeks, we've seen very successful efforts to actually contain, for the first time in 6 years, what could not be done in 6 years was very nearly achieved in 6 weeks, because somebody is running for re-election, and this was becoming a problem. And then, superimposed on the absence of a national will is also the problem of building a regional will, you know, in West Africa. The way the French and the English went about their colonial business in Africa, because they didn't see eye to eye. They didn't see eye to eye. You know, the French British rivalry was very intense and very bitter, and they were both mutually contemptuous of each other across the continent. And those sentiments have persisted. So Nigeria is this Anglophone giant, surrounded. Nigeria has no Anglophone, surrounded by French speakers. So the Nigerian axis is London, Washington. All the French speakers is Paris. In fact, the first time they spoke to each other, the presidents of the affected countries, the first time they spoke to each other about Boko Haram was when François Hollande invited them to Paris. That's the first time that these three African leaders were going to talk about a common problem, because if you are an Anglophone in the continent, you tend, there's Francophones. If you are a Francophone, you tend, that's, you know, a reproduction of colonial division. So they cannot get beyond the Frenchness, and the Englishness thing to forge a genuine. The Nigerian president actually got into a lot of trouble, you know, from, you know, how could you have gone to France? How should you have gone to France to sit down with these Francophones and all that? So again, the Anglophone, Francophone thing, which should be familiar to a Canadian audience, by the way, you know, because you have those Anglophone, Francophone political and cultural issues here. So that has just stood in the way of these countries being able to build a strong regional consensus, you know. So what you have is situations in which they are acting unilaterally. The president of Chad, for instance, has been very active. He goes into Nigeria, he makes raids and all that, and makes international announcements. The president of Cameroon does the same thing. The president of Nigeria does the same thing. And you wouldn't think that the three of them were actually facing the same problem. So if you could get over the affiliations to Paris and London and think about this as a strictly regional African problem, you know, maybe there would be some headway. Thank you.